Welcome back. I'm glad you're still with us. Time now for the Kickstarter conversation, and we shall be querying Uganda's electoral amendments since 2025. We will seek to find out how the laws speak to democracy. I have with me a very formidable lineup of panelists who will be helping us with the perspective as well as insights, especially as we prepare for the 2026 general elections. The calls for reforms have been persistent, and many times the voices that come through have either been heard, some of them claim they've not been heard. We'll be finding out which ones in particular. Are they the activists? Are they the opposition politicians? Or even you, the citizens? Have you been able to say what you want, how you want things to be done as you prepare for an election that is not only going to be hotly contested, but also anticipated widely across the globe? Joining me on set, I have on my immediate left, George Musisi, a lawyer and a honcho with the National Unity Platform. He's also aspiring Member of Parliament for Chira Municipality. Many thanks for joining us.
Pleasure to be here. Good morning to the viewers and my colleagues. You call me a member. If you call me a honcho, people might think that I distribute funds. I'm just an ordinary member.
You're a member of the National Unity Platform?
Yes.
Okay, interesting there. We also have Job Kija. Job Kija is a seasoned commentator. He's a public policy analyst and a regular with us here on MorningAtNTV. Many thanks for making time.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, NTV viewers.
We also have the combative and very reserved today, retired Major Paula Awich. He's head of external affairs, director at the National Resistance Movement. Many thanks for making time. You are reflecting. You are reflecting deeply. What is it that you're reflecting on?
Greetings to my colleagues and greetings to the viewers, and I bring greetings from the mighty NRM. I was reflective because I have always told you that for the avoidance of that insinuation that when you join NRM,
you become a wheelbarrow. You
remove your brain. I want you to make uniform introduction, especially when you call on professionalism of one panelist. Then you make it go across the board.
Okay.
Otherwise, I'm happy to be here.
Thank you very much. Let me stay with you. I have with me a book, The Best of the Best, made in Ntare School, The Lion Still Roars. You are an old boy of Ntare School, and as I was trying to see the names and the faces on here, I see retired Major Awich Paula. This is a book written by Fred Sheldon Mwesiwa, the good doctor and man of God. Wow. What do you say about this?
Yeah, maybe you can let the viewers just see the cover, the front, as you wish.
It is Best of the Best, made in Ntare School, The Lion Still Roars.
Now, Best of the Best, made in Ntare School is an attempt by Bishop Sheldon, the current bishop in Ruharo, in Mbara, to show generally improvement in education, particularly at secondary level, and as he sees it from the eyes of Ntare School. So of course, as he sees it from the eyes of Ntare School, he was there, a deputy headmaster when I was a student. So he was capable of seeing which actors, the students who stood out as good students to champion this. So, but in its general thematic concern, it talks about the attempt by government, an attempt by all boys to put in their input in the transformation of education. And I really request that all boys read it. Particularly, I request President Museveni to read it, and President Kagame, because it picks off from where they passed through, and also it is interwoven by the two presidents' attempts at improving education, both in Uganda and Rwanda. So much as on the top it talks of best, the photos show best of best, and I'm there, but generally it mentions all students inside.
That's right.
And therefore, I think I'm good. So when I'm here, treat me as a good person.
Of course I do, no doubt, no doubt.
So when I'm here, treat me as a good person, because the man of God is talking.
Man of God,
not the man of Satan, the man of God. And therefore, I really request all boys to read, particularly the two heads of states.
Thank you very much. Gentlemen, I had to do this because many times we fail to get an understanding of how things have gone on that have shaped the country's political, economic, and social trajectory. But when men get together and write such books, I'm hoping to read one in the near future from George Musisi.
Yes.
I'm sure George,
who is also a man of God.
Who is also a man of God, no doubt. We are all men of God. All right.
At least will feature in mine.
Let me.
The way
I'm honored. Let me begin with Job Keja. Your good offices as an activist and one that has followed very closely the policy trajectory, especially for Uganda over the last 20 years. Today we are talking about querying electoral amendment and reforms that have been sought after, especially since 2005. First, take us through what the thrust is in terms of this so-called reform agenda, if I were to use that word. How have we come and where are we?
So there are two tracks that I can make reference to. One is what has been going on in terms of the amendments, and then the other is the proposals that have been made consistently. Now, and I think the ones that have been made, the amendments that we've been seeing through the pipeline, started around mainly 2005. In terms of the electoral laws.
That's right.
And I think the most significant one that we all know is the amendment of the Constitution to remove the first safeguard to, let me say, to the life presidency in the case of Uganda. And we're looking at the presidential term limits, the two terms, which were removed. Of course, we remember the manner in which these term limits were removed. There was extensive debate, but at the end of the day, from what we recall, is that some members of parliament, many, were actually given about 1,500 USD, which is the equivalent of 5 million Ugandan shillings. First, yeah, to see through that. Of course, prior to that, maybe I should actually say we had the return to multi-party politics. I should have mentioned that. That was around 2002. When 2002, when we returned to a multi-party dispensation from the one-party system. Now we had the removal of presidential age limits. Fast forward, they've been quite a couple. I mean, around 2000, I think. Five term limits.
17.
Then before 17, we had the addition of an I on the Electoral Commission to make it the Independent Electoral Commission. There was that amendment. But that essentially was actually in response to now the crusade which had really peaked around the entire, I think at that time, George, you should have been working with SEDU, the electoral reform agenda, whereby at that point we had really traversed the country and were asking what kind of reform citizens wanted. And at that time there was really overwhelming demand for the return to the presidential term limits. But fast forward, what we had in that respect was actually the addition of an I to make it the Independent Electoral Commission. So there's nothing substantive. Fast forward between 2013 and 2014-15, civil society, in collaboration with a couple of citizens, political parties, including the NRM, by the way, we engaged in an extensive crusade to now do a comprehensive package of reforms that were necessary. Because these reforms, I need to mention, that have been informed mainly, or the proposals, by observer reports that have been emerging from observation missions from the EU, from civil society, from the AU, and others that have been fielding over the past, let's say, 3 decades of holding elections in this country, observer missions, and coming up with concrete proposals that then, after we had all these that were being presented to government and they were not being responded to, we said, no, let us do something that is comprehensive, that gives us a package that we can actually now meaningfully present. And we brought on board everybody. At that time, I was working with the NGO Forum. We brought together political actors and we brought together the NRM as well. And we came up with what we call the Citizens Compact for free and fair elections. I think to date, it is more like the SI unit of the reforms that we need in this country. Or if you may want, George Musi might call it a blueprint of the reforms that this country needs. And I think everybody, including the people within the ruling party, actually referenced that. Because in that process, close to 70% of the participants in, for instance, the national consultation for free and fair elections that we had at Hotel Africana was NRM. It wasn't any other political party. So I think this actually probably is the most representative in terms of the NRM that a political process of that nature has actually involved. So we came up with that compact, presented it to different stakeholders, including Parliament. But I think I need to mention that for all these years that we've been presenting reform proposals to Parliament, there's been one constant. Electoral reforms are always overtaken by time. In that, Parliament never has the time to actually look at these reform proposals. And that's why this time around we had actually started earlier. We had started around 2012, 2013 and came up with this comprehensive package which we presented to Parliament in 2014, hoping that by the 2016 elections they would actually have had enough time to make these reforms, to enact them. Now, what did we see? Of course, they were not taken care of. And I think at that point, was there any amendment, George? I don't recall whether there was an amendment in that regard. But fast forward, I need to mention that in the build-up to the 2021 elections, that's when the famous Niwagawa bill, I think, was presented, which actually picked from the Citizens Compact. No reforms again in 2021. 2026, as we gear up, working with the NGO Forum, Kituo cha Katiba, and a couple of other stakeholders. Again, we started this crusade, but referring to the Citizens Compact, and a couple of analysis has been done. Again, it is the same reform proposals that are being made. Why do I say that? Because if you look at all the elections that have been held over the past 3 decades, the issues have not changed.
They haven't at all.
The only thing that has actually changed is violence. The face of violence has been changing. Okay, so the reform proposal about removal of the military, for instance, from the elections has been a constant. The only thing is that the manner in which the violence has been playing out has been changing. The actors have been changing in terms of face, but also the modus operandi. And I need to mention that initially, we were talking about, okay, now the military has to get out of the elections. We need to clarify what the role of the military can be, what the police can be, what the other security forces can be. Right now, we are actually, I think, asking whether the military can reduce on the amount of pressure that it is using, on the level of violence that they are meting out.
Complete removal of the military from the equation.
Yeah, actually we have now abandoned the removal because we are seeing that it seems to be extremely difficult to remove them for as long as this government continues to conduct elections, because now the military has actually taken center stage. So the question now has become, where can the military reduce? Because in the past, for instance, you didn't have the military coming clobbering people and chest thumping. You didn't have the military promising that, you know, most recently we have had the Chief of Defense Forces declaring that, you know, apologizing actually before he does something, that I am sorry for what is going to happen to this political party tomorrow. And fast forward, what have we seen? We have seen that he has actually in a way followed through and done what he has promised. But the other aspect I think we are grappling with, in terms especially of the violence and the role of these security agencies, is the informal groups that we are seeing, the vigilante groups, the militias that we see that now seem to be deployed, and they are doing whatever they are doing under the supervision of the official security forces. If you look at what happened in Kawempe, for instance, in the most recent Kawempe by-election, you realize that the military was there, the police was there, but then there were these goons that were coming from where we didn't understand. We didn't even know who deployed them, and they were causing mayhem in the different electoral areas. They were kicking ballot boxes, they were beating up people, and all manner of things were happening. People were being abducted by people that we did not understand. And we feel that that is also a new occurrence that actually has to be addressed, especially if we see the official security forces in the watch of what is going on.
What is going to happen.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, Job Kija. Allow us welcome Marion Chirabo on board, politician. She's also a lawyer, yes, and a cadre, yes, within the National Unity Platform.
Yes.
I was going to again fall into the trap of saying a honcho. Welcome on board. Retired Major, when you look at the run-up to 2026, let me just throw back to 2000 when Uganda held a referendum, and the one that ushered the country into a political multi-party political dispensation. The national resistance movement has appeared to be too cagey with the system where all parties can play at a level field in the contestation of politics and ultimately power. I do not know where the fear lies largely in allowing, for example, other actors do the politicking, so to speak, as they ought to. The continued stifling and the reluctance to embark on critical reforms that are needed is something that appears to be a tactic within the NRM's toolbook.
Thank you so much, and I really want to thank you for giving my brother very humble time. I hope I benefit from the same.
No doubt.
I hope I benefit from the same.
Some of it,
yeah,
appreciation.
So, first of all, your assertion is not correct. There's no show that there has been intended stifling. There's nothing to show that there's a denial of the level playing ground, and we don't believe that in the party. And that is why the question at hand is about the laws, because it is only through the laws that we have institutional approach, not as and when. And therefore, when election is pending, or even before that, the Electoral Commission will always ask government to avail its resources. Now, among the resources is not only finance. Among the resources needed are the laws. And that is therefore it is incumbent on government to ensure the other arm of government, the legislature, does its work. You know the connection between the three. Therefore, to ensure that the ground is level, government has always, or NRM for that case, has always ensured that the resources available to Electoral Commission, particularly in laws, forget about resources in terms of personnel and money, but laws are available. And we ask them, what laws do you want put in place for you to act properly? And they have come with it. Now, other laws have come from individuals, particularly the two constitutional amendments. I think one came from Honorable Kakoza, that is lifting of the term limit, and then the age limit by Honorable, the now Minister of Local Government. Now, when it comes as an independent bill from independent members, all that government needs to do is to provide its normal support. For example, support of non-interference into the legislative process, support of funding if it is needed into the process, and they are sent to it by the president. Now, we should know that a society is not hard and frozen. A society is dynamic, and therefore you need a living constitution. So, just like any law, if you pass a law today, even a penal code, you will think you have done your best in that legislation. But if you put it on the ground, you see the challenges and the cracks. And therefore, that is why laws are amended. In the case of our constitution, we know that there are provisions which are entrenched that you don't amend anyhow. There are procedures to the amendment, and the ordinary one. So there's nothing wrong with amendment of the law. Others have come through. My friend Mukasa Mulema Mukasa went to court in the other Supreme Court and presented, and I think there were recommendations. Now, the level ground can only be assessed through institutional framework. The level ground that you're seeing cannot be assessed by individual perceptions. Therefore, those who think that there is a need for a level ground, instead of seeing it on a case by case, it should be institutionalized to do that. For example, we are talking of the army. The provision of the law says that the mandate security person for electoral matters is the police. The law only gives provisions for police to call the army in case police finds that there is adequacy in personnel or in the gravity of the gravity of the task at hand. For example, if police finds that the security threat like terrorism is there, they can call on the army. So this aspect of whether or not the military is there, it should be seen from that perspective, that military always only comes at the call of the police. And we hope, therefore, that with less challenges, there would be less presence of the military in subsequent electoral activities. Therefore, by looking at the laws, I do not see discriminative approach in legislation or even in practice. One of the champions of reform and a citizenship pact and all these others had been Honorable Mao. And Honorable Mao has been made the Minister for Constitutional Affairs. Now, if indeed there were genuine calls to this effect, I think the number of years he has had at the helm of Constitutional Ministry, which ideally is the mandate, he holds the mandate of such kind of reform, it should have come out. The fact that it doesn't come out when Honorable Mao holds that mandate, it means that the calls are not clear. It's either a call for political attention or a call for a diversion to the political.
Mao himself was a proponent of such reforms.
So that's why I'm saying. That is why I'm saying, if really
those are not clear.
That is what I'm saying. If indeed it exists, why hasn't he brought it out? Why hasn't it?
Yeah, actually, if you allow me, I can actually respond to Paula. That Chairman Mao himself, Chairman Mao himself has actually appeared on different platforms, and he has expressed his discontent with the call that he has been making and the cold ear that has been given to them, because he has even talked about reviewing the agreement that they have between DP and NRM. He has talked about pulling out because he went there with certain expectations to push for national dialogue, to push for constitutional amendments, and to push for peaceful transition. And Chairman Mao himself has actually on the floor of Parliament, not once, not twice, tabled, I think at some point he tabled a proposal to amend the composition of the Law Reform Commission in light of the fact that the Constitutional Review Commission could not actually be established because of the lack of resources. He made the proposal that the Law Reform Commission should actually be reconstituted, given more mandate to actually deal with these amendments, with the reforms. And what he received in response that actually that also cannot happen.
Well, so what we know is that Honorable Norbert Mao is understanding fully that working within the system might not necessarily represent the best options or chances in rectifying much of what the opposition and any other person that wants those reforms could be looking at. But I need George to.
You see, what normally happens, like which Honorable Mao has done before, is that as a line minister, you table in cabinet your intended cabinet mission. For example, he has tabled on human rights. And when he tabled on human rights, because his cry, and which he said even in public, is that they cannot pretend of a country where human rights is violated. So he presented in cabinet, and a cabinet committee on human rights was formed, including the Minister for Security, Internal Affairs, Defense, and all that. Now, I have not yet seen this proposal that he has tabled to cabinet, and it tells us it is rejected. If the human rights one is tabled and was accepted and moved on and said, please don't cry about human rights, have this committee with a cabinet committee on human rights, work it out. Therefore, the call for a lack of a level ground is a call that is not merited.
George Masisi, do you agree with retired Major Paula Awich on the fact that the National Resistance Movement has done everything sufficient to provide a level playing field for the opposition, including the National Unity Platform?
Of course, the only person who can agree with Major Awich, my learned friend, is a person who has just come into this country this morning. If you've been here long enough, you know that the context, what is the context of seeking reforms? Chris, we are being delusional if we discuss reforms without looking at the bigger context in which they are playing. The reason why we advocate for reforms is because we are looking for free and credible elections as mandated by the Constitution. Anyone who has been here long enough would know that the NRM government is not interested, does not have any interest in having free and fair elections. Of course, the person is talking about our good friend Honorable Mao. I think learned either was being delusional when he was going, or naive, or he learned the hard way. Because if you look at the things he said when he's going there, and the frustrations that he's talked about regarding reforms, you know that. First of all, there are, and then the other context I want to tell you, where Job talked about the issues of constitutional reforms. The two fundamental constitutional reforms we've had, especially touching the presidency, the one in 2005 and 2017, which had the effect of entrenching a life presidency, certainly meant that any form of credible elections was stifled. So all these things we are seeing are just supposed to be ancillary to the other bigger issue that they created, the life presidency. That is why it's not even about elections only. It's about the stifling of space in civil society, in the media, sometimes even academic freedoms, sometimes even religious freedoms. So since 2001, we've had some recurrent issues regarding reforms, especially the two recurrent ones have been the involvement, not just military, but actually security agencies in elections. And the 2001 elections are the ones which had Kalangal Action Plan kill over 100 people, as per the Human Rights Watch report. Till the elections we had recently in 2021, where we had the official government report saying over 50 people were shot on the streets of Kampala with stray bullets. Quote unquote, stray bullets. That's the government report, 54 and up to date. So the involvement of security and the issues of the independence of the commission. Of course, all the other reforms have been peripheral, administrative. Job is talking about the issues of the name. They have been peripheral, but the core recurrent issues have been those. And we've had Supreme Court decisions. In 2001, one of the issues the Supreme Court talked about was the delay in bringing electoral reforms. In 2006, the same issue was highlighted by the Supreme Court. In 2016, the court even went ahead to give the Attorney General what we call structural interdicts, to say that make these reforms, come back and report to court. Still they defied. So you'd be delusional if you don't look at the will. Does this government have the will to organize? Because the purpose of reforms is to bring credible elections. So if they don't have the interest in having credible elections, what is the purpose of having the reforms? The other day, last week, when Honorable Mao was at the opening of groundbreaking of the EC offices, I saw on NTV giving the media saying, we are bringing an amendment. Imagine nominations for candidates are next month. But the Minister of Justice is saying, we'll bring an amendment to electoral laws. And he said it won't affect so much because these are issues we've agreed about. Major Wich, you're a lawyer and you know that any amendment, especially an electoral process, already the electoral process is rolling because elections is not voting. Parties have gone through, some people have been elected, parties are going through the internal, and then the Minister of Justice is saying the amendment is still in the cabinet, it's not even yet in Parliament. Yet it's affecting the election calendar, which is where nominations are next month. So Do they have the will? No, they don't. Even when the Supreme Court gave them directions that you amend the laws early enough, come back to us, still the Attorney General didn't do that. So if you are talking about all these other reforms that we are seeking, since they are targeting having a credible election, and the government doesn't have the will to have a credible election, it would be a waste of time to agitate to think that reforms in themselves will be the magic one. In any case, if you look at the problems that we have with elections today, is it about the lack of laws, or is it about the implementation? Because even with the current laws, if they were enforced, because there is no law which says that the army should go and beat up people. Director which is saying that, army comes in at the instigation of police. We saw in Kawempe, the police saying, we don't know who these black people are. The police said that. So up to now, there's never even been a report. In your elections in NRM, you had the shooting in Remiyaga and the death. Has anyone been brought to book by the army? Had the police failed to control 100 supporters of Sechikobo? So the issue is, we look at the broader context that we are a militarized state without a will to hold a democratic election.
Marion, welcome on board.
I'm so sorry. I got really
Looking at what I can describe as, have there been any low-hanging fruits in regards to the reforms that maybe have positively impacted the conduct of elections? When you look at, for example, since 2020, what is notable is the changes in the Electoral Commission Act that saw the electronic transmission of results from district returning officers to the National Tally Center. This is normal growth, so to speak, something that is supposed to improve the process of tallying, but most importantly, the revelation of those results. Is that something we should drum for, or simply take as growth that ought to happen, and then put the Electoral Commission and the government on the spot to be able to push and bring about more reforms as required by the opposition and many other actors?
Well, yes and no. I'll start from where my colleagues had talked about Job and Mosisi, the fact that even when on the books it looks good and it can actually bring true reform, there is no will to implement. We have a saying in civil society that Uganda has all the best laws compared to our counterparts, but the problem is implementation. When it comes to those particular laws that you've mentioned that were introduced in the last election around 2020, basically we were in a COVID era, and it was, how do we navigate and still have elections running? And unfortunately, it took us this time to, have that reform and bring technology into our elections. It's unfortunate that we had to wait for a pandemic to be able to do that and catch up with the rest of the world. But also knowing that right now we have, for example, when it comes to knowing if you are a registered voter in a certain area, you can always go online, and that is accessible to you instead of going to the EC and trying to figure out if you're a voter or not. I think that is a good reform. The fact that you can know right now, for just by the click of a button on your phone, that you are a registered voter, I think that's a good addition. The transmission of results, though people were questioning that if the internet had shut down, how was the EC able to get results that fast? So you can see that even when these laws, if implemented, can make the voters' lives easier or the participants in these elections easier, there is just that, one, the mistrust that we have, but then also the lack of will to make them work. But on my hand, I would say that not only looking at the electoral laws, because we mostly concentrate in parliamentary laws and the presidential electoral reforms.
There's a whole lot of others.
I think also when it comes to local government, I'm currently running as a councillor, so we keep on looking at these laws and also reforms down. I think in 2020, though the thing is the implementation. There was a law, especially when it comes to women, that mandated that for every electoral area there should be a woman councillor to bring a kind of gender parity, and it was implemented then. Unfortunately, we saw that that law was completely disregarded in the recent demarcations for local government, that instead of every electoral area having a direct seat and a woman seat, this time what the Electoral Commission did was to merge, especially reducing the number of women's seats available. So you see that even when there is a good law that is supposed to perhaps bring gender parity, what happens is that it's perhaps they have noticed that it benefits the opposition more than the ruling party. So let us draw back, and they'll give you all sorts of excuses. You see, the population, has reduced in this area, but I mean, there's a law. So if you want to challenge it and you're saying that it is not right, you go to the Constitutional Court. You don't just sit and make your own laws. So, and the fact that most people do not pay attention to some of these amendments, they get away with it. For example, I'd say that for us, we petitioned in the case of Makere using that amendment, and we were able to get a response and get our electoral area back. But I know for so many women in Kampala, because of their perhaps lack of resources and not knowing that that law exists to create a gender parity, they are not able to. So there are those gaps. The system takes advantage of people's illiteracy and their lack of resources to kind of implement these good low-hanging fruits. So I think perhaps going forward as political parties, we have to be very vigilant in sensitizing the populace and especially our candidates, that how do we push for these reforms? How do we push to make sure that that what we have on book works, at least in the meantime, as we're fighting for other reforms. Okay,
thank you very much. I'm glad you bring in the context there that captures the women's agenda, especially at the the local level. Major Awich, there has been, and allow me transition to some other aspects of the reforms, because if we dwell so much on the presidential and Council Awich.
Major, you address him when he has other panelists who are soldiers.
Retired Major Council Awich. That is, should be a perfect one. There's been proposals, and this has, I don't know whether it ran into troubled waters at Parliament, whether it was just because it was controversial. Constitutional amendment bill that sought to introduce proportional representation, reducing the size of Parliament. Reducing the size of Parliament alone is a pivotal reform process that could help reorganize the country's election cycle, especially when it comes to the logistical nightmare that it is, from 529 to an acceptable 342. That is, if every district has one mainstream MP and then a women representative. Is that something that should be expedited, especially if the reforms as required or put together by Matthias Impuga are anything to go by?
Thank you so much. I'll address that, but just in a second, let me comment on, to take leave of what we have been discussing. Now, I still want to insist, particularly to my counsel, and even him, because he has been in the theater. We have for long had the urge that, you know, you have not been able to bring reform, you have not been able to bring reform. Now, how I wish my colleagues could mention just in bullet form, for example, what we wanted to introduce. Our proposal was 1, 2, 3, 4. Because right now it is in a minibus. Everybody will come and tell you, you want reform, we want reform. For example, a clear case was a case of the position of people in prison and people in diaspora. Now, this was proposed. It went to cabinet.
It's actually a judgment now.
Now, you very well know, Council, the relationship between the judiciary, the courts, and the executive. So when it comes from the courts like this, the executive takes it up to cabinet. Now it meets the challenges. Remember, in the law it provides that if an act or a proposed act has financial implication, it has a big challenge on any law being proposed. Therefore, not in bad faith by government, but sometimes some of this proposal meets the practical challenges it has. So I'm therefore saying, instead of my colleagues calling this animal, this minibus envelope animal reform, they have had very many platforms. How I wish they had, like the case of the priest, how I wish they had been able to put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so that we said we call for this note. But for a long time, all of them just talk of this animal called reform, the animal called reform, and nobody actually unpackages it. Therefore, I want to mention that, and I urge my friends going forward, they should always list out.
Okay,
yes.
I'll give you the opportunity to continue that submission, especially with regard to my question, but let's allow Job Kija to list as a major council requires that to be done.
So like I did mention earlier, the Citizens Compact for Free and Fair Elections is comprehensive.
I heard that.
I can refer you to that, but if you want me to just give you some highlights of the reform proposals that are being made there, the first one, which is very significant, is on the manner in which the Electoral Commission is constituted, the appointing authority who appoints it. As we speak, the President appoints the Electoral Commission. It is accountable to him, and so you can't be a referee and also a player at the same time. So there's that.
It's accountable to the people, but reports to the President.
Well, yeah. So there's the manner, because I mean the proposal that we've actually made there, we are not even saying that let the President not appoint. We are saying can appoint, but let the EC serve 1 7-year term. And then, in that the EC doesn't have to rely on the President again for favors to reappoint them. So let that be done. That is number one. Number two, we've been talking about the repercussions for indulgence in electoral practices. Money in our politics has really vulgarized our politics. People are selling. The other day we were seeing a minister bribing voters in the NRM primaries, and nothing is done to them. People like that should be behind bars. They should be locked up. So really, the bar needs to be set so high for somebody to indulge in electoral malpractice, in electoral fraud. That is. To the third, has been around the role of the military security forces in the elections. You've been talking about the police calling upon the military when they don't have enough backup.
The police fails to handle 100 Ugandans.
Yes, at the moment, actually, as we speak, the police themselves are complaining to us, citizens, and saying the military has taken over. Please, you make some noise for us, for these people to get out, because we don't understand. The police is talking about investigating the military. You've seen them fighting, being beaten up, etc.
For now.
So yeah, I mean, you look at Parliament, the composition of Parliament. We are saying you can't have this assembly, public rally in Parliament legislating on laws. It is so large. You need to be able to have something that is manageable, that is cost effective for the taxpayer. Okay. So the reforms are so many. I'll give you the Citizens Compact after this show, and then you can really acclimatize yourself with these reforms.
All right, Major, as you prepare to submit on that, we need to understand why, in the quest for a leaner Parliament or Legislative Assembly, the President does conveniently continue to talk of creation of more constituencies, and this is usually rampant in the run-up to a general election. Maybe it's the numbers game that the National Resistance Movement should stay way ahead of all the other political parties. That's your question when we return from the break. You're still with us here on the Kickstarter. We are querying Uganda's electoral amendments since 2025 and looking at the landscape, especially with regard to the reforms that have been much sought after by many political actors ahead of the 2026 general election. Whether we are on track to achieving some, well, that is up for debate. But before we went into the break, I'd put it to retired Major Counsel Paula Awich, and the question, I might paraphrase it, but the context is pretty much the same. In the run-up to elections, especially general elections in the country, we've seen the tendency by the National Resistance Movement, led by the chairman himself, who is also the president, formation of new administrative units. And many times the agenda has appeared to be to leverage NRM's numbers game by offering more players the opportunity to come into Parliament. That makes the problem a bit, it makes things worse, because we already have a bloated legislative assembly, and when these administrative units come up, the problem becomes bigger. Now, what we saw in the run-up to 2026 was not that the president didn't want these administrative units, but the plan was failed. The permanent secretary and secretary to the Treasury was very unequivocal in saying we do not have the resources for these new administrative units. Had he cowed to the pressure, these administrative units that would see, for example, splits of districts like Tororo into the controversial, counties that have always wanted greater power over the others, could have seen the light of day. Now, if the NRM does not drive this critical aspect of reforms in ensuring that the Legislative Assembly becomes more manageable in all terms of logistical, numbers, how should we even regard your intent, especially when the debate for reforms comes on the table?
Thank you so much. First of all, my insistence on unpackaging in bullet forms the intended reforms has helped me. It has helped me in the sense that when he lists the Electoral Commission, although erroneously said they are now accountable to the president, when he lists,
I corrected him.
Thank you so
they
much
report
for
to the president. They are accountable to the
And
nation.
then when he mentioned the use of money, when he mentioned the role of the military and the size of parliament. You see, when you unpackage this, it doesn't give that insinuation that it is NRM blocking. Why? Because these are ordinary day-to-day things which all of us are demanding, including NRM. So if you list it like this, it's different from putting it in a box where the viewers think that there's something hidden that NRM doesn't want. All this is what we're demanding for. What it means here, therefore, is just the procedural aspect that has delayed it or that's had hampered. I gave the example of prisons and diaspora. So, now, in the case of the question and art, there's no, come on, I sit at nearly all forums that discusses these issues. As a director, I also attend SEC. I attend top management meeting of the party with the chairman. There's no intention whatever in any circle that shows that the president or the party is hell-bent on creating. The Tororo thing, for example, came up. It was a demand from Tororo. It was the president himself who said, no, we can't do it. Remember, we had a law from the Kwezira. Kwezira went to court and petitioned Constitutional Court on this matter. And there was a ruling about that. And therefore, the president and the party cannot go against the law. You are saying it was stopped by the accounting officer, Minister of Finance.
That pressure.
Come on. If government wanted, government can even appoint a new accounting officer. Was it brought there by God? So you cannot convince me, and I don't want the viewers to be convinced that the stopping of the bringing new constituency was because of PS finance.
The proposal was out.
If government wants something, which government has assessed is in the interest of Ugandans, you cannot tell me such a move can be stopped, not even by Minister of Finance Kasaija, or even Governor Bank of Uganda. You will get your time. Or even the Secretary for Treasury. So when government wants it, it will be done. So it is not intended in any way. We respect the law and we shall abide by it.
Just to be clear, just to be clear, that proposal went to cabinet. That was Minister Raphael Magezi who revealed that the proposal had been mooted and was before cabinet, and he had been directed by the cabinet to submit it for creation and operationalization of administrative units. So let's be clear.
That means it was defeated in cabinet, because if it is defeated in cabinet, cabinet is a collective responsibility of government.
Okay.
And we are open and democratic in it.
All right, gentlemen, many thanks. I'm afraid we don't have a lot of time. I'm going to allow the use of exactly 45 broadcasting seconds. So we'll wrap this up. Let me begin with Mr. George Masisi.
Well, in a discussion, should not ignore the context. Even talking about a reduction in the size of Parliament. Yes, Parliament is too big, is bloated. But has it been increased because of following with the representation in terms of numbers or political expediency? You realize that some of these constituencies, Chira, Nasa, should be having at least 4 MPs each. But then you have a constituency when job is in, they will even create, there's one they call West Budama Northeast. Almost a village. So the reduction will not happen because it's been bloated by the expedience and gerrymandering that we've seen. So it's about politics.
Marion Chirabo, your last word.
I would also agree that when it comes to electoral reforms and us having free and fair elections, it's about the goodwill of those who are in charge of this country. And we should not lie to ourselves that they have any will other than to entrench themselves in power. So going forward, I think as people of Uganda, we need to be more proactive in pushing them and pressuring them to do what is right. The people of Uganda should come together and make sure that we push as hard as we can.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, Marion Chirabo, for that wrap. I'm afraid I'm going to have to introduce a few reforms on MorningAtNTV today. Major Awich and Job Kija, you've had a go at each other sufficiently. I'll allow that to rest. But most importantly, after the show, the conversation does continue. Major requires some aspects rectified in terms of bulleting down these reform demands as needed. That will do it for this edition of MorningAtNTV, but most especially the Kickstart. I hope the submissions have emboldened your understanding of what is happening in as far as some of these thrusts are, especially as you prepare for the election. Again, we would like to urge all actors in this political process to be patriotic. For the voters out there, there's a lot that is being brought to you, so much information, there's a lot of falsehood that is being perpetrated. Please ensure that you know who you are voting for, you know who you're listening to, but also take heed and caution on some of the messages that you receive. Be peaceful as Uganda prepares to shape itself into the democracy that it wants to be. I'm Chris Higenyi.